Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name's Mike and this is Build and Tinker, and we're continuing today with the build of the Hachette Ford Falcon XB-GT Post-Apocalyptic Edition. We're looking at issues 39 to 42, which I think is going to be a little bit more electronics and some drivetrain components. So let's get started. So here's the model so far, and we have most of the main part of the chassis completed, the rear wheels and rear wheel arches in place, as well as the spare wheel well. And we put the electronics in the last issue, where we added the PCB and some of the cables, and we've got a bit more of that to do here. The parts for this edition, for this issue 39, include some clips. I'm not sure what they're for yet, we'll find out. A couple more cables. And we also have the battery box itself and the cover for that, plus some screws. So let's have a look at where all of that goes. Let me start with the cables, and there are 4 of them in this issue. Again, all nicely labelled with numbers on, so it should make them pretty easy to figure out where they go, because the numbers match those printed on the PCB. So we're going to start with the first one here, which is number 8, and number 8 fits in just there on the board. Next one is number 5, which goes on the inner one of these two. Let's get it the right way around, there we go. Number 7 goes over, number 7 goes over here. And then number 6 is on the outside here. So numbers 5 and 7 have to run towards the back of the car, and there's a channel that runs just to the side here of the spare wheel well. So we just need to bring those together, push them into that channel, and it looks like we might end up having some clips to hold them down. So on this sprue here, they've given us some little clips, and we have to take one of these off and put it into the little mouldings here in the chassis for these clips to go into. And we just have to push, there's a little hole in the clip, and we just have to push it in, and it will cover over where the cable is. It's quite hard to film it and get my finger in the gap. And there's one here, another one just there, and the 3 alongside the spare wheel well, so we'll just get those fitted. I'm just going to see if using tweezers is easier. And the next 3 are down here. I'm not massively confident these are going to stay in. They're a bit fiddly to get in, and they don't seem to fit very tight, but we shall see. And there we have those cables now tucked underneath there and all connected. So these 2 cables that remain, number 6 and number 8, they need to come across this side of the chassis, and just here, here and here are 3 little plastic tags, and you can slide the cables underneath them like so. So there's one on the transmission column here, there's another one just underneath it. The cables just slide under, and then there's another one on this side here. So now that we have the cables tucked under these clips, they now come up through another channel, just like the one on the other side, and it comes up this side of the spare wheel well. And again, the cables come out the back, and we just need to clip them into place with the last of the cable clips. And that's the cables installed. And now we take this battery box, which is this piece here, and that sits across the back of the car here. Now we need to make sure we get the cable sticking out the right way. There is a little channel in the back of the box for the cable to run in. It seems to want to push the cable out in this direction. And we want this cable obviously coming out into the car towards the PCB, and it sits over these two little posts here and here. And again, it's a pretty easy fit, and we just screw that into place with a couple of PSO5 screws. So it looks to me like we're going to be accessing the batteries through the trunk area. And we have to obviously plug the battery box in. There is only one socket left on the board that's vacant, and it's number 15, and we just need to plug that in the correct way around. And there is a lid for the battery box that just snaps on and faces that way. And that's everything for issue 39. So we'll move on to issue 40. So for issue 40 we don't need the chassis on the bench because we're actually starting to build the transmission, and we've got a couple of key pieces here. They're both made of metal. They are the two sides to the main part of the transmission. We also have some hoses in a separate bag here, if you can get that out. So there are some hoses and another little plate or cover of some kind. We're going to need to cut this bag open, so let's get that done now. I think this is going to be relatively straightforward. The key thing is making sure we identify which hose is which. And we have three, they're all different. So we have 40D, 40E and 40F. D has this sort of Z kink in it. E has another bend in it and a couple of right angles, and then the straight one is F. So we're going to start with F, and we're going to attach it to this side of this transmission housing, and there's a little hole just here. You can probably hear that on the mic. The heavens have just opened here in Hampshire, and it was a beautiful sunny day when I walked into this room only about 20 minutes ago, and now it's overcast and absolutely throwing it down, so just going to wait for that to pass before we carry on. Okay, so the rains have stopped and we're back in action again, and we're going to start assembling this transmission. So again, we're looking for the short straight piece of hose called 40F, and that's going to plug into this little hole here, and then this first hole on the left here. They literally should just push in. Now I don't know if there's a correct way round, but it does say, it just says to fit the peg on one end. So, well, this is one end. I'd say this end went in slightly easier than the first one, so I don't know if it makes a difference, but if you're struggling to get it in, flip it around and try the other way, and that's pushed in quite nicely and it's pretty flush. The next one is this one here that has a bend on the end, like a kink on the end, and we take that kink part and we're going to put it into, well, first we're going to rotate this the other way up. So we're going to put the kinked part into there, and the pipe's going to cross over the first one and then find its way into this small hole on the end here. And again, they push in with a little click, and that's fine. And then the next thing we need is this little plate, and it has one long stud on one end and two sort of short ones on the other end. And we need to position it so that the long stud goes into, again, we're going to orientate it this way around. The long stud on the back is going to push into this lower hole here, like so, and we have a hole there, and we need to line that up with the hole on the other side, and this hose, this one remaining hose, is going to hold all of that together. So there's a kink in this hose, and then there's a longer piece and then a shorter piece. So the shorter piece needs to be here on our right, and the longer piece is going to go into here, and it should go all the way through and actually lock the other part of that plate in. And then this one remaining end, it actually found its way into the correct location, which was this hole on the right hand side. And there are the three transmission lines that go into the side of this transmission. We do have the other half of the transmission, but they don't want us to do anything with it in this particular issue, so we'll move on to issue 41. So with issue 41 we get this, which looks like some sort of, it could be an oil filter, and it is. We get a plate for the bottom of the transmission and the oil pan. We get part of the bell housing, a small packet of chrome screws. In fact, we get two different sizes of chromed screws. And we start by taking the piece that we didn't use here. So we're going to set the one with the hoses to one side for a minute. The piece that we didn't use last time, and you'll see it has these two sort of half holes machined into the bottom. And this plate here is going to attach to that. And it fits one way round, so there's some cutouts. They go at the front of the transmission. It's a bit odd that we're screwing it in, but only half of it's there. And we take the chrome screws, which are PS40, and these have a little flange on the base, so they're going to help hold this into place. And it wants us to start by screwing in just the front one, I think. So we're going to start with the front one. In fact, we might find it easier to start the screw off with the plate on the deck like that, and then just bring it over like so. So the easiest way to get these two screws started is to actually start screwing them in gently with the plate laying face down, but just not very far, and then place them over the top of this half of the transmission, hold it together, and then tighten them up. Just make sure it stays in position as you tighten it. Don't think it needs to be super tight. So don't tighten it too much, because we need to get the other half of the transmission installed. So it should be just enough to hold it, but not too tight. It's a strange way of doing it, but there we are. Then we take this end of the bow housing, and it slots this way into, there's a little grooved piece on the end, and it will slot into the transmission housing just like so. It'll hold itself in place. And with that in place, we can then take this other half and just slot it over the top of the whole lot. Okay, and that now all comes together, and there's a screw hole on the, in fact there's two screw holes on this other side, and we screw those in with the DS02 screws. Obviously being careful not to damage the hoses on the other side. And then the last step is to take the filter, and that just pushes onto this stud on the end here, like so. And that's the end of that issue. So quite straightforward. Issue 41, and we'll move on to 42. So with issue 42 we're going to assemble the transmission shaft, and we've got the two halves of the shaft here, one of which has two massive posts sticking out of it, so I'm guessing it's not going to rotate. And then there is a support for the transmission and some screws. So we have two packets of screws. The first step is we need some PS14 screws. In fact, looks like three of them, sorry. So let's get three of those ready. I'm going to bring the two halves of the transmission together, making sure the holes line up. So I'm hoping that means it can only go one way around. Let's try it the other way to be sure. Well, that's worked either way around for me. And we're going to need the car back, because we now have to attach this to the chassis. So we have the transmission shaft here. You'll see on one end it has a peg that is centered, and one that is off-centered. The off-centered one goes into our diff, and then the two pegs that stick out the bottom go one into this hole here, which is raised, and one into this flush hole here. So we're going to put the pin into the diff first, and then the whole thing should hopefully just drop neatly into place, which it does. We are screwing it in, however, from the other side using some PS14 screws, so we are going to have to try and hold this all together and rotate the car at the same time. The holes that we're screwing into are just here and just here in the middle of this transmission tunnel. So with the first one in, the second one gets a little easier. We'll just support the piece from underneath. And that's the transmission shaft in place. We now, with the car upside down again, so we're going to flip it back over. We're going to actually install the transmission itself into the front part of the car. So again, there is a hole in the end of the transmission, and that's got to go onto this hole in the end of the transmission shaft. And then there's a couple of posts here that are going to align with a couple of holes here. And the whole thing just sort of drops into place quite nicely. And then we have to screw it into place with some DS02 screws. And again, that's done from the other side. So we flip the car, just hold the pieces in place, and we're going to put one screw in here. And then with the car on its back for one final time, we have to put in this bracket. This is the transmission support bracket, and it drops into place over these raised posts here. And there are two little holes, so that pushes into place. And then again, we have to turn the car over one more time, holding that part into place underneath, and then a couple more PS14 screws to secure that. Now, one of them is quite easy. You can see it here in the plate. It's a little hole. The second one's a little harder because it's underneath the cables that we installed earlier, so we just need to part the cables, and we can just about see there's a hole there. And that's the end of issue 42, and in fact the end of the video. So relatively straightforward today, just putting a few cables and pieces on, but that's, I think, going to be everything for the gearbox. Although there's only one half of a bell housing, it looks like we don't really ever see the other half. It sort of disappears into that void in the chassis, but all the cables are now in, and we have the battery box and everything, so we don't have any LEDs or anything we can test it with, but hopefully very soon we'll get some more electronics and we can test that. And I'm sure it won't be long now before we'll start assembling the front part of the car, the suspension, and being able to put the engine in and the front wheels, which will be great. I hope you enjoyed the video. I did. Apologies for the rain noise earlier on. It really did start to throw it down here very briefly, and in literally 10 minutes after that the sun's come out and it's beautiful again. So great British weather, very hard to predict. If you did enjoy the video, please remember to click that subscribe button and click like. It really helps promote the channel and it costs you nothing, so please do that. I'd really appreciate it. In the meantime, have a great day and take care.